I believe we're live. We'll just give it a couple of minutes until people log on. Okay, let's get going. Welcome everyone. I'm Julien Redmond, the host of the first meetup for the DV Innovators Community. I have with me today Nols Ebersohn and Vincent McBurney. Hi guys.
Hello Julien.
Good day.
Let's start with an intro. Vincent, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I've been involved in DV for about 15 years. I'm a certified trainer. And I've been on many DV projects over the years. I currently work at MLC Insurance in Melbourne, Australia. We're building out a data vault for insurance data.
Excellent. And Nols.
Hi everyone, Nols Ebersohn. I'm currently a principal architect at Certa Solutions. I've been working and applying my craft for the last 27 years. In the data warehousing and intelligence industries as such, and I've got a couple of continents, so I'm also a authorized data vault trainer. So hopefully we can help answer a few questions along the way.
Thanks, Nols. And I'm General Manager for Certus Insights, and we are the authorised data vault to trainers across Australia and New Zealand. So if you're looking for training certification, I guess we're the place to come. But we wanted to introduce today the Data Vault Innovators Community. This is a new initiative that we've kicked off with the help of DVA, the Data Vault Alliance. We've created this community to serve a purpose of helping people to actually learn more about Data Vault, to have a place to connect with people, and give professionals of all types a place to learn and interact with others around Data Vault. So the mission really is to help individuals and organisations to solve problems using the Data Vault methodology, and really helping grow that knowledge and use cases, and have a place for not only individuals but organisations that are investing in Data Vault-based solutions to connect and share knowledge, share examples, and share expertise. And obviously that provides also a place for people from a professional development point of view. You can come and get certifications, but also connect maybe with organisations that are looking for individuals like yourself that have Data Vault skills. So you'll see the community grow, and we'll talk a little bit later on about the actual schedule of upcoming events and podcasts and those sorts of things a little bit later. But I guess for now we wanted to kick off with a little bit of a discussion around Data Vault. So we'll jump to the next slide, Drew, if we could. And I guess the key underlying question really for this audience, guys, would be how can they be successful with DV? What's the recipe for being successful with DV? So, Vinny, why don't you maybe tackle that first, and we'll see how we go there.
Yeah, so I got started with Data Vault. I was doing a data warehouse for a university, and I was the data modeler. And it was very important at that time for the university to have accurate point-in-time data for enrollments and student teaching load. And they wanted to know exactly what the data looked like at the same time last year and the year before that and the year before that, because the data tended to get modified and overridden by the source systems as the unit enrollments either dropped out or fully enrolled and paid up. So I came across Data Vault as a way of storing the source data in time series satellites to get an exact copy of the data over time, so you could rebuild what the source system data looked like. So that's why I advocated for it back then, and that's why I'm still using it today. So the critical success factors back then and the ones on the Data Vaults today is how do you ingest all your data into the time series satellites and build the hubs and links? How you do it quickly and efficiently so that you're not you're realizing the ROI Data Vault, which is to get the data ingested, designed and ingested up very quickly. So I'm an advocate for using a tool-based approach, a Data Vault automation tool that lets you interactively design your vault, make all your key design decisions, and then it generates the Data Vault automatically. It generates the tables, it generates the load code, so that you don't spend any time on pattern-based, building out pattern-based data load jobs. Everything's generated for you. What happens with Data Vaults is there's no magic bullet for cleaning, consolidating data. You still need to take data out of your Data Vault and clean it and consolidate and merge it based on the user requirements. So you still need to fix up the incompatible data across source systems at some point. But in the Data Vault world, that's done in the business vault and in the information marts or the data extracts. So a critical factor is, are you building your Data Vault and loading it quickly so that you can spend the majority of your time and budget improving the data, turning it into marts and turning it into reports? And the other critical success factor is the strategic use of a business vault. When you do have complex cleaning, consolidating rules, which are almost unavoidable in warehousing because sometimes data across source systems just doesn't fit together very well, I advocate putting some of that into a business vault so that you're doing that heavy lifting, that data transformation and merging just once into some business vault target satellite tables. And then that results of that can be used in your data marts, your reports, or your data extracts, or your data analytics. So the idea being you do something once and benefit from it many, many times. So those are my two main critical success factors.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, technical architecture and the right technology is a huge step in getting a Data Vault working. We've seen that our friends at Gartner have mentioned to us before that if someone tries to do Data Vault from a manual, in a manual way, then they tend to have a fairly short life cycle, I think, just because of the effort of maintaining it over time manually. But there's also another aspect to it, Nols, the process side. Can you talk a little bit around what you need to do from a process perspective to really get Data Vault right?
Sure. So fundamentally, we are changing the way we view our information management. We are changing away from trying to chase the contents, which is infinitely variable. And so we keep adding more and more information, more and more data, but that does not really give us something concrete to work with. And this is where Data Vault provides those patterns, trying to deliver on what's effectively the two functional requirements for what you need to achieve for your corporate memory. This is what a Data Vault is. It is your corporate memory. And so it tracks the facts in their time context, which has been done before, but where it really shines is that integration. And this is where the patterns become very important from an approach or a process perspective, because process is all about consistency, about driving out consistency in your delivery cadence, consistency in your orchestration, consistency in your testing, consistency in how you address your technical debt, your business rules, consistency in how we collect and manage our requirements. And so these success factors is where Data Vault helps. Now, you can't have a Data Vault and ignore the people component of it. You still need to build a culture. And so how do you build a culture? A culture is built by educate, demonstrate, educate, demonstrate, educate, demonstrate. There's a continuous process in doing so. If you have consistency in your education and demonstration, then you get consistency in your processes. So the patterns are a real enabler, but the hard yards are still in your court. So DataVault does a fantastic job of giving you a framework and a methodology to go around it, but you are required to execute against that. So the elements that bring the success together from a process perspective is, yes, leverage the technologies where they exist. Yes, leverage the patterns that may exist for those elements, but bring your team along. This is a team sport, not an individual element. And so the success of your DataVault is also tied into the success on how you engage with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the last part of it for me is training. You really need to know how to actually, build a DataVault and maintain a DataVault. And the certification training is obviously a great place to start for that. And I think the other thing that we see regularly where people are successful is where they have ongoing mentoring, leverage the experience of the teams. Obviously, Vinny, your team's got you, so plenty of experience. But organisations can certainly leverage the years of experience that are out there in DataVault, just to get those standards right, get those templates right, and follow the process the right way. So, talking about how to get DV right is essentially the reason that this new community exists, and what we really are aiming to do is help people to be successful using DataVault to have the best projects and deliver the most value to their businesses, and spend time very much on the analytics end of the spectrum, or the resolving business rules end of the spectrum, rather than on data acquisition and integration. I do remember, though, talking to a customer, and they were talking about the value of integrating data sets. And obviously, when you can integrate like data sets or related data sets into a warehouse and then provide deep insights to the business, that's when you're going to get the most value. So that's why this new community exists. It's why we're going to the effort of running these sorts of podcasts and lots of content that's going to be coming. It's really to create a community where everyone can share ideas and get the most out of it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what you'll start seeing in the community. In the launch of the website will actually be launching this Friday, and so you'll all have a link to that. We encourage everyone to sign up so that you can receive all the newsletters and notifications of these sorts of meetups and any other events that are happening. There'll also be a almost continual release of new and interesting content. And so that starts with the very first piece is an interview that I recorded with Dan Linstead a couple of weeks ago. And Dan and I are talking a lot about the Worldwide DataVault Conference, around what DVA is doing. We've got obviously a strong association with DVA, but they have a very specific business structure to manage the standards and deliver quality training globally, and obviously we're part of that. And the community then is there to support that and help people to onboard to DataVault. So Dan and I had a really, really interesting conversation, and we talked a bit about what would be coming in the following releases in this, I guess, in this first content sprint. So there's 4 podcasts that are going to be released. The second one is actually a conversation with Richard Strange. It was actually a presentation he did at the Worldwide Conference, and I know both of you guys attended that. And it was a deep dive into how data science works with DataVault, which was pretty interesting because a lot of people talk, I guess, around the architecture and the data engineering and the get a warehouse and then, put some reporting on the front end. But he talked a lot around the how do you do data science using a DataVault, and what are the benefits, and I guess what are the challenges as well. Although there didn't seem to be a huge amount of challenges. And he's working with seismic data, doing volcanology and trying to predict volcano activity and that sort of thing. So it was really interesting, his talk. So that'll be the second of the podcasts that are released. And then we have Scott Ambler talking about disciplined agile. And guys, I know that there's a question. While I think of it, if anyone has a question that they want to add, you just need to go to the YouTube page and put it in the comments. We do have Drew monitoring that, and if there's any additional comments that that anyone wants to ask today, we have a series of questions for this panel, which we'll get to shortly. But we're always keen to have additional questions and really answer the questions that might be on the tip of your tongue. But Scott's conversation was around disciplined agile, which is baked into the Data Vault methodology. And from what I've seen from more recent projects, is the value of the agile methodology and the principles really is one of the keys to getting the teams organized and delivering regularly and delivering constantly and really providing value to the business. So that's a really interesting one to listen out for too. And then the fourth of the podcast is actually your presentation, Nols, at the Worldwide Data Vault Conference back in May. And that's on the laws of nature as they relate to information, which is a really interesting way to think about information, I think, and it puts it in a really different perspective, really takes that content-centric to component-centric journey, I guess. So that was really interesting. And then a final piece that'll be released in this first sprint is a thing I did with my team, looking actually at how SpaceX is using their development processes and Agile to build rockets, and how that actually relates in a similar way to the way we go about building warehouses. There's some quirky kind of overlaps, obviously very different outputs, very different outcomes. But when I watched it, it was a video I discovered, and I watched an interview with Elon Musk, and it was just the similarities were amazing. So I had a chat with my team about that, and we're going to share that with the community as well. And then as we go into next year, we're going to have a series of different topics that get delivered as content sprints. And Vincent's talk from Worldwide Data Vault event, the Worldwide Data Vault Consortium, I should use the right name. His talk on a review of automation tools will be one of the pieces of content that gets delivered just after the new year. So there's lots coming, lots of things to keep an eye out for, lots of reasons to subscribe and stay in touch. We're actually releasing the website, as I said, goes live Friday. So we want everyone to get onto that, and you'll be able to see not only the new content we're talking about today, but content going all the way back to the DVA conference that we ran in March 2020, which was the last time we had Dan in Australia, and very rapidly had to get him back to the US as COVID hit. So that was a bit of a challenge. But that website will have all of that previous content, all the stuff that we've done since then. So I've had interviews with Ashwin at Macquarie Bank, Robert Walters with Jim, with CQU, a range of different organisations and different vendors as well, the team at Warescape, the team at Snowflake. So we'll continue to have more and more of that content, but there's already a lot of stuff to actually get on there. And the community website will actually grow. We'll actually start seeing things like a marketplace come in, where you can actually look at essentially the technology offerings that align to the different parts of a Data Vault architecture. There'll be partners and affiliations to help keep this community going. And then an event schedule. We hope to be doing physical events relatively soon, but we'll be virtual until then. And then we've actually got a schedule, if we could bring that up, Drew, just to show, I guess, the types of things that you'll see coming. So there's a range of topics there on the top that'll effectively be the content sprints that we'll be delivering. So a buyer's guide is the first thing that we'll be talking about in the new year, but there's a range of different topics. And we're really keen to hear from the community about the sorts of things that you'd want to hear about. What are the topics that are of interest? What are the areas you'd like us to dive into? And within all of those, we'll do maybe podcasts and videos as well as white papers and case studies. So there'll be a multimedia kind of content delivery every couple of months. We'll also be doing quarterly meetups like this one, and we'll be picking topics, I guess, to dive into there. So things like data quality, governance, other aspects. Again, we want to hear from the community about the types of topics that might be of interest for meetups, and some kind of showcase days as well, where we can do deeper dives. And that may be diving into the technology of a specific aspect. There's a range of different things that we can do there. And then finally, I guess we want to really build an interactive community asset. So we need to hear from the community as to whether forums are a thing that are actually of interest. Is that something that people actually want to have available to them? Range of other potential things that we can deliver. So we've mentioned the marketplace. But discussion groups, we can actually have special interest groups as well. So if there was a special interest group in, say, data science or master data management, related topics, then the platform that we're building for this community will actually have the ability to deliver those sorts of capabilities. So we're really keen to hear from people what they want out of this community. Obviously, the goal is to help you achieve the outcome for the business, so the analytics or the insight that you need. So it doesn't stop just at how do you automate into a data vault, into a raw vault or a business vault, but in fact, how do you get the insights out of your vault as well to make it the asset that you really need from your business. So that's essentially what's coming. Guys, did you have any comments or thoughts on that? I've talked for a long time.
There's a lot of great content coming up, so thanks for the plug there, Julien. Humbly, hopefully it resonates with a few in the audience. As far as questions are concerned, please bring them along, or there's a Q&A session coming up, so please, if you can note your questions down, we will certainly get to them in short order. Exciting times ahead. Thanks, Julien.
And Benny, I guess from a non-service, so outside of, I guess, obviously Certus is trying to get this up and running, it's really an asset we want to hand over to the community. But as an external, I guess, I'd be keen to get your thoughts on the plan.
Yeah, look, I enjoyed being in Data Vault discussion groups over the years. So it's always good to be able to pose questions or answer questions somewhere. And also accessing the training, but also the sessions from Data Vault conferences are quite valuable. I find them very valuable to go back to even a few years later. So will that still be available and running in the going forwards?
Yeah, great. And I noticed we've actually got a question, so we'll jump into the Q&A part of the session today, and we've got a question from Keen Lim. So DAD, can someone buy me a vowel on DAD? Is great. Any examples of data ops or CI/CD approach? I know that's something we're dealing with a lot, Nols. Data dialogues is great. Is that okay? So any examples, guys, of data ops or CI/CD approaches? Nols, do you want to jump first?
Sure. Metadata is your friend. Let's just put it straight out there, because this is the crux of what your data ops and CI/CD, particularly in a continuous fashion, really concentrates on, is leveraging the elements or the known elements that we have and building that into the fabric, leveraging that metadata. For instance, if your source systems are producing more columns, etc., you know where they are, you have the configuration, you understand where they've been modeled or designated to go, configured to go. And so automating that process end to end to essentially naturally and organically ingest those additional information elements is not only possible but recommended. So the schema evolution type elements, the impacts on CI/CD, being able to, in fact, manage more your metadata and then actual physical artifacts, because your frameworks and and code base remains relatively stable if you leverage the patterns and the automation opportunities that exist, of course. But metadata is your friend. Without metadata management framework and configuration around that, your CI/CD processes, data ops processes will be, let's say, a little bit more hands-on than otherwise. And so from that perspective, leverage your metadata, drive out the processes to actually recognize and take those metadata elements into play so that change events cascades through your architecture in a controlled fashion, of course, but certainly allows for that automation and leveraging or lifting the capability of your platform.
And Vinny, is data ops and CI/CD a thing for you yet at MLC?
Yeah, look, it's becoming more important around complex business rules. So continuous integration and delivery, we've found that we want to take complex business rules in the business vault and complex data transformations and get them into an environment where we can verify them against production-like data and to see what the data looks like, whether the data supports the rules or whether there are gaps or outliers or unexpected events in the data that are breaking our rules and leading us to produce a report or an extract that doesn't look right. And there's only so much testing and verification you can do in non-production or mass data in dev and UAT. So continuous integration to us is once we've vetted the code, how do we move it into a pre-prod environment automatically and deploy changes automatically? How do we deploy the table changes and the load code? And where it's scooped up and delivered into that environment weekly, and everyone can put in their features and their functions in there. They can apply them to the main release or to sub-branches of the release and see what that code looks like against production-like data very quickly and understand where the gaps are and what's wrong. So to me, it's making it easy to move your code between your environments and to combine your different branches together so that you can see the results on real production-like data and just get to know the attributes of that data more quickly and how it's interacting with your business vault, your information master, and your reports.
Yeah, there's actually the podcast we did last year with Ashwin from MLC. I think he touched a lot on data ops. So if anyone interested wants to jump back, that podcast will be available on the new community site as of Friday as well. It's a good deep dive into data ops. And similarly, what Richard Strange talks about in his, there's definitely around applying those data science models like a business rule essentially, and loading the results of that into business vault tables and the testing involved in that. And so it's certainly becoming a thing, and I think DV2 kind of gives you a path to making those more exploratory kind of models, productionizing those and turning them into BAU outputs that that normal business users can consume as well. So I think there's a lot of alignment in data ops and DV2. So
you touch on a very important point there, Julien, because the premise of CI/CD is that in fact your testing is also integrated and framed within your CI/CD processes, and so allowing your testing therefore needs to be pattern based as well. So Data Vault really lends itself to that. But how do you achieve that? And even for business rule testing, you need to get to the point where techniques that Agile brings to the table, such as test-driven development, really needs to come to the table and bring that discipline of defining your inputs, have a curated output that allows you to do that testing in a quick, easy, pattern-based approach. Because with a curated input and output, even the business rule testing, which is typically notoriously difficult, becomes a lot less cumbersome. The additional benefit is because your business have to be engaged in part of your requirements gathering side to define your curated inputs and expected outputs, really helps to validate the requirements, make sure it's complete. So that discipline is a key underlying assumption for successful CI/CD, particularly in an information management framework.
Yeah, I think we could probably get John Chow in for maybe one of these specialty groups to talk a lot about testing. I know it's a subject close to his heart, and it really is. It's bringing software development discipline to this, which is, I think is important, obviously, to get those outcomes. Okay, so another question then. Why DV versus a lake or an industry model? And Nols, we'll go to you first.
Okay.
The big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. Let's start with the first fundamentals. A lake is but a storage architecture. It's not a solution. And so from that perspective, a lake has been given many attributes and many things that it can solve, but the lake is but a storage architecture. You still need to fundamentally provide the rest of the infrastructure, the rest of the architecture needs to be established to truly be able to deliver on your information management principles. And so it is a component, absolutely, and that's fantastic. Now the question is, so what's the difference between the lake and a data vault? And it comes down to what problem are we trying to solve here? The fundamental problem we're trying to solve here is to actually provide a corporate memory. So what does the corporate memory need to do? It needs to be able to integrate the different information, and we know that that is possible via business keys and relationships, and we need to track the facts in their time context. So those are the two tasks that we are fundamentally trying to solve in creating a corporate memory. So taking those elements into place, unfortunately, a technology such as a lake does not necessarily deliver on all of those functionality. It may do so on keep some of the facts in their time context. Great, we've got that. But then the most important part of the entire architecture, understanding how the information relate to each other, what the relationships are between them, is entirely lost. So this corporate knowledge, this intellectual property that is held within the organization's knowledge base, which is somewhat intangible until it's expressed as a physical artifact. And this is where Data Vault really is different to the other methods or the other modeling approaches out there, because it lifts up and specifically manages those relationships. That's the secret sauce. And this allows you to navigate from one side of your information landscape to the other side because of those known or identified relationships. So does an industry model help in those regards? Industry models are great in that they present a fairly robust list of different concepts and ideas and their possible relationships that they may exist. And that is fine, but unfortunately, most organizations have an eclectic selection of different applications with a varying degree of discipline applied from a modeling perspective. So your implemented reality is unfortunately a stumbling block that you cannot squeeze past. So the theoretically ideal gets shipwrecked on the rocks of reality of the implementations that have been done. So fortunately, Data Vault helps us to navigate around those by expressing what is in your data. Of course, if there's any gaps, then business vaults help us to bridge those gaps. As Vincent mentioned before, that's where the technical debt is resolved. Vincent, over to you. Different perspective.
Yeah. So, look, the industry model is an interesting one because I've actually got an industry model available to me. I've got the Accord industry model, insurance industry model, and I attend their monthly meetings, and we use it quite successfully in data integration. We use their industry model for the digital transfer of records between systems or from our digital channel. I've got the EDW version, and I looked at it very closely how we could bring it into our EDW. And I kind of use it at the moment as a mentor, as like a subject matter expert on insurance. We couldn't apply it physically into the database. So one of my challenges is I've got to bring in a Salesforce contact table into my EDW and then create a reporting dimension around the concept of that contact being an insured person or a claimant. Now, with an industry model approach, a Salesforce contact table's got about 300 attributes, and an account's got 300 attributes, and a policy's got 100 attributes. if I bring contact into an industry model, I'm probably looking at about 50 ETL jobs. That contact record has to be broken up into reference data tables and party tables and party subtypes and role tables and this and that. And from experience, it requires like 10 times as many ETL jobs to process one landed file and bring it in. So we would have spent months just bringing in that one table. With Data Vault, I can bring contact in into the Data Vault in just a couple of days. It's just generated as hubs, links, and satellites. And then I can selectively bring it through into the Business Vault. And we created in the Business Vault the concept of an insured person as a Business Vault table with 12 attributes. And then I can create the concept of a claim and a claimant and take some records into that. So I only had to process like 20 of the attributes into the Business Vault, and then I could use it in my information marts. So to me, the big problem with the industry model approach was it wants you to transform all your data for the sake of transforming it to this industry model view, even if that's not what your business users want or ask for. And then generally, you still have to transform it all again to turn it into information marts and turn it into the names and labels that the users are expecting. Often that's not what the industry model wanted to call it. So often you have to transform and rename everything once into the industry model and once into the marts. And it's just a lot of painful design and ETL work. So I use industry model and its glossary to try and work out what things could be called and what objects I could have in my Business Vault. But at the end of the day, we design our Business Vault according to the needs, the high transformation needs of the users and their reports and the idiosyncrasies of our source systems like Salesforce and how it gives us the data. So we like to do data transformation that we think is needed rather than doing data transformation that's handed to us by an industry model.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because certainly not the picture that some vendors might promote with their industry model, their source application, their industry model, their warehouse, and their BI tool, and saying that it's all going to work kind of auto magically. But with that level of transformation and complexity, it becomes very hard to automate anything, I guess. So.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's well, Nols, I did like all of the nautical references to rocks and everything else, kept with the lake theme. So well done. All right. So another question then, Vinny, this one for you to start with, I guess, is. And we talked a little bit before, is what's the critical aspects to a successful Business Vault setup?
Yeah, so this is more of an art form than a science in the Data Vault world, how to use a Business Vault. So the main concept of Data Vault is on the way in, you don't really have any complex business rules or anything that reinterprets the data. You bring data into your raw Data Vault as is, pretty much how it looks in the source system. And then on the way through and out of the EDW, you apply business rules to conform and consolidate and clean your data and create your reporting or analytical rules. And that rule can happen either on the way out of the EDW or in a Business Vault layer. So the Business Vault layer is kind of add-ons or addendums to your raw vault, where you transform data and clean it up and write it back to hubs and satellites and links. And then pass it into your information marts or in extract files. It's not mandatory, and it's meant to be a sparse layer. It's only meant to have a fraction of your data in it. I like using it for anything that's of strategic importance to the company and that needs to be done, that's complex, and you want it to do it once and write it back and then use the results of that across a few different channels. So in our case, we want to create the concept of, most insurers care about the concept of assigning new business or lapsed customers. So I want to generate new business and lapsed data once in my Business Vault and then send it to several different data marts, or send it to a data scientist to tell us why lapses are happening, or send it to as an extract to our regulators like APRA. So I want a single version of what we consider to be new business and lapsed customers. I want that to be defined once and written once into the Business Vault, so it's consistently extracted and reported and used everywhere. So that's important enough that it goes into a Business Vault. So to me, Business Vault is all about strategically designing and transforming, creating rich data once and making it available to use through multiple channels.
Yeah, great. It is a bit of a kind of misconstrued or misunderstood part of the DV architecture. I think we've certainly heard people talking about, putting it in a separate database or a separate schema. I think that the fact that it does exist in the same schema and is just sparsely populated with that important information is actually a really important message for people to sort of understand and take on board. Nols, what about you?
So Business Vault and Role Vault has a particular job that they need to do, and that is what's satisfying what's called the burden of proof. So the audit trail of what has been done, what has been derived, what has been created, what's been received. So that burden of proof sits with your data vault as a whole. And so you have two logical areas within it, because you obviously have the raw data that you reconcile to source. And then you have the derived data, which you have the history of those derivations or outcomes, historized like any other data vault construct. So it looks like a data vault, it smells like a data vault, it's still integrated, very importantly, within your data vault. So you have that result and you have the audit trail, you have the burden of proof satisfied. And as Vincent's pointed out, you now have the opportunity to have a single definition of a rule and its outcomes, and that is then available across the entire enterprise. Now, it may surprise some of our audience, but there is no such thing as a departmental business rule. If you're part of a business, you're part of the enterprise, and so all rules are, in fact, enterprise in scope. They may be very specific. That's not the issue, because there's typically more than one use for that very same information, or across more than just one team. So the Business Vault is literally just a home for the neglected data or the missing data, so that at least you can have a full picture of the entire enterprise data set at your fingertips. And once, well, ask yourself this question. If you need to build a report or an analytics problem and every single piece of data that you require is at your fingertips, how long will that take? And the short answer to that is not long at all. And so then your actual reporting, your information management and delivery mechanisms are purely functionality orientated, as opposed to technical debt constrained. So I keep calling the business rules technical debt, because those business rules are artifacts of things that are either not done, missing, or not integrated. And so those three types of things will manifest as rules in your analytics efforts. So that is just a form of technical debt. And this is where Business Vault really helps to answer that and allow you to create the missing bits and integrate that as well. So then you have a complete set of data, and your reporting and analytics efforts dramatically improve in both efficiency and speed.
Excellent. No, that's great. So, I mean, it is such a big part, and it is that kind of mystery. But when you get Business Vault right, then it certainly makes the next step leading on to information marts and delivery of self-service BI such a more usable thing. So I'm sure we'll dive into that a lot more. But we do have another question. Okay, so Nols, maybe to you as well, if you've got a glass of water you need a sip. What's the right approach to testing?
Testing needs to be done till it's enough. Because sometimes we fall in a trap where we test everything to the absolute nth degree, and we retest of things that should arguably not need testing because we've tested it before. And this is we need to understand why that is a tendency, because in the past we've always had bespoke pieces of development. And so with our patterns, that is the necessary successful way of testing, is test, and always test. Whereas with patterns, it becomes a lot less onerous, because once you've tested a pattern, that pattern, unless you make a code change, will never change. And therefore, it actually reduces your test effort. And now you start testing the necessary as opposed to everything. So if your test effort is equivalent to or exceeds that of your development, then clearly you need to reevaluate how you test. And now that's reasonably straightforward to understand how to test data vault structures themselves, because they have a finite set of behaviors. They are dictated by the Data Vault 2 standards as to what they should or should not be able to do. So those are reasonably straightforward to do. There's about 10 to 15 use cases for each entity type that typically will resolve or test the necessary standards fairly rigorously. However, when it comes to things like business rule development, here we are literally delving into application development world. Because how do we build business rules? It's logic, if, then, else, etc., those type of things, which is typically just a subset of a broader business process that was incomplete. So we need to develop those elements like application fragments. And so, as I mentioned before, the test-driven development approach, where you only develop until your tests are successful and then you call it done. Even though you may go and try to gold plate it and all the rest, no. You test until the actual business requirements are met and then it's called done. So understanding and keeping to that discipline and knowing that you iteratively will be chipping away at the similar problem and eventually get the final product is part of the agile mechanism of delivery. But this is the thing. You get early, consistent feedback engagement with your business, and without that, you will never be successful with business rules. You will always be refactoring what the assumptions you've made, and that's where you get caught out. So testing needs a very good engagement with your business. So from a process methodology side of things, that is the secret sauce.
And it's an iterative cycle, isn't it? Obviously, analysis doesn't always uncover everything. And so the testing can uncover more. And as you said, the closer you are to the SMEs, but also their knowledge of their systems may not always be perfect first time. So it becomes that iterative process. How important is it to have a test data set and a set of known outcomes you're testing for? Is that the right way to go?
That is the key, or that's the whole premise of test-driven development. And in building the curated input set, which essentially helps you to figure out whether you've got all the possible combinations in there, that's what the business helps us with. And sometimes our subject matter experts are surprised by the combinations that do exist in the data because they either don't know about it, forgotten about it, or it's a legacy artifact, but it's nonetheless still valid. And so using what's within your data and combining that with your subject matter experts, it is not hard to come up with a representative sample of use cases to drive the functionality that your business rule is trying to deliver on. Of course, have a couple of versions, in other words, a few iterations worth of samples so that you can both track the changes over time as well as the appropriate combinations, makes that test set complete. And then your whole testing becomes pattern-based. So, for instance, you can use a tool like Query Surge or what's the other tool? It'll come back to me in a moment, where you can use the patterns, which simply say, I have an input and an expected output, I can test that. And so regression testing is now done complete within the machine time as opposed to people time. And we know that machines don't get tired, they don't need sleep. As long as you give them clean air, no moisture and electricity, they tend to keep working just fine.
Yeah, that's true. So, Vincent, is that what you're following? Is that how you're trying to build your testing?
That probably accounts for half our testing. But most of our business analysts prefer seeing the results in production like data. They're not happy that it works until they've seen the numbers come out against real data and maybe reconciled it against other parts of the business. So we're finding the concept of a data traceability is really important, which is tracing a data entity all the way through the EDW. So we have policies and we have covers and we have customers. We want to know if they've made it through each layer of the EDW and shown up in the MART and the report. So we need to be able to trace a cover all the way through from the source, landing, raw vault, business vault, MART, and report. We need to be able to account for all of them and find out what's dropped off and why it's dropped off. So we put a lot of work into managing of business keys all the way through so that you can trace something, identify and trace it, which is hard when it comes from multiple sources. but we can identify and trace it all the way through SQL and queries. We can trace it all the way through, and then examine or investigate those that have dropped off. And usually we find weird data quality problems or weird data migrations that we would never have anticipated is behind it. And we either eliminate that data or we fix our rules. But that whole data traceability, I think, Raw Vault's got a perfect snapshot of the before image of data. Business Vault and Marts are the after image. If you can trace and link that data and find out why some data made and some didn't, that's going to help you test out all the possible scenarios and not just the ones that you thought of when you did your test plans.
And so you're using a lot of metadata management to drive that?
Yeah, and mostly it's around business keys and trying to track identifiers and what a business object is, what a cover is, and what a policy really is, and what its grain is, and how does it move through Business Vault and Marts? How do we trace it back through if it's shifted its grain or been aggregated? So there's a lot of work and a lot of queries being written to trace data through and investigate when data gets dropped off.
Because it kind of sounds a bit like you're talking about lineage, but to a deeper level, really. You're really trying to follow an individual set of data rather than how the system's connected at a traditional sort of lineage view. No, that's good.
And we need to account for everything on the way out of the EDW, make sure every cover has been accounted for and every customer has been accounted for on the way out in the extract files or the reports.
And I guess Vault's always had a really strong footing in being auditable, reconcilable, especially in governed industries. So that obviously still holds true. Do you think you're adding to that by taking this approach, or is you just applying sort of just an extra level of scrutiny?
Well, Vault through its hubs and links helps us to trace it through from Raw Vault to Business Vault to Mart, because we've got lookup tables with all the different business keys, the primary keys, the business keys, the foreign keys, the keys from different systems. You need to manage all those keys and have them available in lookup tables so you can trace an object through all its layers, or that same object from multiple source systems where the keys don't always line up very well. So we're finding that the Vault's modeling of hubs and links is helping us trace data all the way through.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Well, look, I mean, I don't want to dive into another question now because we'll end up running over time, and I think that's probably important. But we definitely have some questions around the use of Agile, around automation. I think there's definitely a security question we're going to dive into at some point here as well. So I'm going to get you both back pretty soon for another chat. But we might start wrapping it up now. I guess a couple of things I wanted to mention to the audience was that the community page, the community website, will actually be live on Friday. So everyone who's in this or seeing this will get a link to the new website. Please go and subscribe so that you get all the communications. The other thing I'd like you all to go and have a look at is the new training offerings that we're delivering through Certus, specifically hands-on training as an extension to the standard Data Vault training and certification. So that's available now, and the details on that are on the training page of the Certus website. We have the content sprint coming, so you'll see that this week as well. The first piece being the interview with Dan, and that's a really interesting conversation. So try and go and watch that. And finally, just to make sure we're kicking things off and delivering some content, we're going to do a follow-up meetup soon. So instead of doing one every quarter, we wanted to get two done straight away. So we'll be actually doing another meetup on Thursday, the 9th of December. We're going to do that at 9 a.m. Daylight Savings Time, so Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, if anyone's joining from overseas. And so 8 a.m. in Queensland and 11 a.m. in New Zealand. So there'll be an update going out around that as well. So please join for that, and we look forward to talking to everyone really soon. And thanks for joining us today. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Julien.
All right.
Thanks, Julien. See ya.
Bye-bye.